Arrived 20 minutes early to the venue, which was exactly the kind of thing I always did. My mother used to call it a character flaw. "You make everyone feel late," she'd say, laughing in a way that made it clear she wasn't entirely joking. I'd learned to stop arguing with her about it. Some things you just absorb and carry. The restaurant was called Oleander. My aunt had chosen it, my mother's older sister, the one who actually remembered that I existed. She'd made the reservation 3 weeks in advance, texted me the confirmation screenshot without being asked, and called me the night before just to make sure I'd eaten lunch so I wouldn't show up starving. Those are the kinds of things you notice when you've spent most of your life not having them. I was turning 29 in 45 minutes. The hostess smiled and showed me to the table. It was a round table near the window, set for 5. I sat down, smoothed the front of my dress. Dark green, linen, the one I bought on sale 2 months ago and hung in the closet specifically for tonight, and looked out at the street. The early October air had turned the light the color of honey. Everything felt possible in that light. I let myself believe for a few minutes that this year would be different. My aunt arrived at 6:49. She came through the door already pulling off her jacket, already scanning the room for me, already smiling before she found my face. "You look beautiful," she said, hugging me like she meant it. Behind her was her husband, my uncle, carrying a small gift bag with gold tissue paper. He set it on the table and asked if I'd decided what I wanted to eat yet. I hadn't. We laughed about that. It felt normal. It felt like a birthday was supposed to feel. My aunt ordered sparkling water, and we looked at the menus, and she told me about a trip she and my uncle had been planning to Portugal and asked if I'd ever been. And I said no. But I'd always wanted to go. We were talking about Lisbon when my phone lit up on the table. I didn't look at it right away. I was in the middle of a sentence. But I saw my mother's name on the screen, and something in my chest did a quiet thing. I've gotten very good at ignoring. I excused myself and picked up the phone. The text read, "Hey, I know we were supposed to be there tonight. We're not going to make it. Your stepfather is dealing with something and we need to be home. I hope you have a good birthday." I read it twice, then I put the phone face down on the table. My aunt was watching me with the careful expression of someone who already knew. She'd known my mother longer than I had, in the way that older siblings know each other. Fully, without illusions. "They're not coming," I said. She pressed her lips together and nodded. She reached across the table and put her hand over mine. She didn't say anything for a moment, and I was grateful for that. I didn't need her to fill the silence with something reassuring. I just needed someone to sit in it with me. "Okay," I said. "That's okay." It wasn't, but that's what you say. The thing about growing up with a mother like mine is that you become very skilled at explaining her away. She had a hard childhood. She worked 2 jobs when I was little. She didn't know how to show love the way other mothers did, but she was doing her best. I had a whole library of reasons I kept organized and ready. I'd used them so many times the spines were worn soft. By the time I was in my mid-20s, I'd been carrying those reasons for so long I'd almost stopped noticing the weight. I moved to Austin 3 years ago for a job at a healthcare consulting firm. I'd been a financial analyst there long enough to finally feel like I knew what I was doing. I had a good apartment. I had a cat named Biscuit, small, orange, deeply suspicious of houseguests, but very devoted to me, and a routine that felt like my own. I called my mother on Sundays, mostly. Sometimes she picked up, sometimes she didn't. I'd learned not to track which. My stepfather came into the picture when I was 12. He wasn't a bad man. He was just entirely absorbed in his own world, which was my mother's world, which left very little room for anything else. I didn't dislike him. I just knew from a very young age that I was not a central part of the story he was living. That was fine. I'd made my peace with that. What I hadn't quite made my peace with was what I'd been doing quietly, steadily, for the past 2.5 years, after my mother and stepfather had gone through a difficult financial stretch. His business had a bad year. The mortgage on their house in Clearwater was in trouble. I started helping. Not a lot at first. A few $100s here and there, then more. I'd set up a monthly transfer, $1,200 automatic going straight to their account. My mother knew. She'd thanked me once early on and then we'd never talked about it again, which I had somehow understood to mean we were not going to talk about it. I hadn't told my aunt. I hadn't told anyone. It was one of those things I'd convinced myself was private, when really it was something I was a little ashamed of. Not because I resented giving the money, but because I'd done it hoping it might mean something, that it might make me more real to them somehow. The monthly transfer had been going on for 29 months, just over $34,000. I did the math one night in the spring, and then I put my laptop away and I sat on the couch with Biscuit on my lap for a very long time. I didn't leave the restaurant early. That's the part I want to be clear about. I finished dinner, I had the scallops and a glass of white wine and a slice of the chocolate tart my aunt had ordered without telling me because she'd remembered I mentioned it once months ago. My uncle told a long story about a road trip they'd taken in the 90s that went completely sideways and ended with them sleeping in a parking lot in Tennessee, and I laughed so hard my eyes watered. When the check came, my aunt wouldn't let me see it. "This is your birthday," she said. "I don't want to hear it." She handed me the gift bag before we left. Inside was a silk scarf, deep blue and gold, the kind of thing I never would have bought myself but would wear constantly. Under the scarf was a card. Her handwriting said, "You've always been worth celebrating. Don't let anyone make you forget that." I held the card for a long moment in the passenger seat of my own car in the restaurant parking lot. Then I drove home. Biscuit was waiting at the door. He always waited at the door, which I used to find embarrassing to mention, but have since decided is one of the most reliable facts of my life. He head-butted my shin twice and then led me to the kitchen with the authority of someone who believes firmly in the importance of snack time. I fed him. I changed out of the green dress and hung it back in the closet. I made a cup of chamomile tea and sat at the kitchen table with my laptop open and Biscuit arranged across my feet like a small, purring anchor. I didn't feel angry. That surprised me. I'd expected to sit down and feel the kind of sharp, clean anger that would make it easy to do what I was thinking about doing. Instead, I just felt tired. And underneath the tired, something else. Something quieter and more certain than anger ever is. I opened my banking app. I looked at the automatic transfer. 29 months of it. I thought about the phone I'd bought my mother for Christmas that she'd used for maybe 3 months before she switched to the one my stepfather's daughter had gotten her. I thought about the time I'd flown home for their anniversary dinner and sat at a table where no one asked me a single question about my life. I thought about being 23 and sleeping on an air mattress in their living room because my room had been turned into my stepfather's home office and no one had thought to mention this before I arrived. I thought about the text. "I hope you have a good birthday." Not, "I'm sorry." Not, "We'll make it up to you." Not even "Happy birthday." "I hope you have a good birthday," like I was a coworker she'd run into in the hallway. I canceled the automatic transfer. It took less than a minute. A few taps, a confirmation screen, then it was done. I sat there for a moment after, waiting to feel something dramatic. Some rush of guilt or relief or grief. But it was quieter than that. It was like putting down something heavy. I'd been so used to carrying that I'd forgotten I was holding it. I opened a notes app on my phone and I wrote 2 sentences. "I've been quietly supporting you financially for almost 3 years. Starting today, that's no longer something I'm able to do." I saved it as a draft. I didn't send it, not yet. I wasn't sure I needed to explain myself at all. That was new, the idea that I didn't owe an explanation. I sat with it for a while to see if it would hold. It did. My mother called 4 days later. I was at my desk at work, in the middle of reviewing a variance report, when my phone screen lit up with her name. I let it ring. I wasn't ready, and also I was in the middle of something, and for the first time in my adult life, those 2 reasons felt equal. She left a voicemail. I listened to it on my lunch break, sitting in my car in the parking garage with a takeout box of pad thai balanced on my knee. Her voice was calm at first, then tightened in the way it did when she was trying not to sound like she was asking for something. She said they'd noticed the transfer hadn't gone through. She said she assumed it was a bank thing. She said to call her back when I got a chance. Not, "Happy birthday." Not, "I'm sorry we didn't make it, just the transfer." I ate my lunch. I went back upstairs. I finished the variance report. She called again the next day and the day after that. My stepfather called once. He almost never called me directly, so I knew she'd asked him to. Then her daughter, my stepsister, sent me a text that said, "Hey, I think there's been some confusion about the bank stuff. Can you call your mom?" I didn't respond to any of them. On the 6th day, I sent the 2 sentences I drafted, nothing more. My phone rang 4 minutes later. I let it go to voicemail, then again, and again, and again. I turned the volume down and set the phone on my kitchen counter and went to sit on the couch, where Biscuit immediately climbed onto my chest and regarded me with his usual expression of calm, total confidence that things would be fine. I counted over the next 2 days. 19 missed calls. I want to be honest about something because I think this is the part people don't talk about enough. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel vindicated, not exactly. There was no moment where I pumped my fist or felt like the heroine of something. What I felt was sad, in a low and manageable way. Sad for the version of me that had started those transfers hoping they would buy something money can't actually buy. Sad for how long I'd kept the library of excuses and how heavy it had gotten. Sad for my mother, a little, not in the way that meant I was going to call her back, but in the way you feel sad about a thing you can't fix. I also felt something else, underneath the sadness, something I didn't have a word for at first. My aunt called on a Friday night. She didn't know about any of this, the transfers, the canceled payments, the missed calls. I hadn't told her yet. She was calling to see how I was doing, the way she did every couple of weeks, reliable as weather. I told her, all of it. There was a long pause when I finished. Then she said, quietly, "Oh, honey." And then she said, "You know what I want you to do right now?" I said, "What?" She said, "I want you to go pick up Biscuit and just hold him for a minute. And then I'm going to tell you something I should have told you a long time ago." I picked up Biscuit. He was warm and resistant in the way cats are when they haven't decided yet if they want to be held. But then he settled. My aunt said, "You have been the most patient, most generous person in that family's life for years, and you did it quietly, without asking for anything back because that's who you are." But generosity isn't infinite, and it was never your job to hold that household together. It was never your job to earn your way into being loved. I didn't say anything for a while. "I know," I finally said. "I know that now." "I know you know it," she said. "I'm just saying it out loud so it exists in the air somewhere." A few weeks later, a letter came in the mail, physical mail, which I hadn't expected. My mother's handwriting on the envelope, careful and slanted the way it always was. I opened it on the kitchen counter with Biscuit sitting next to me, watching with the profound indifference cats specialize in. The letter was 3 paragraphs. The first was about how she hadn't realized how much strain they'd been under. The second was about how my stepfather's situation was more complicated than she'd explained, and she hoped I could understand. The third said that she loved me, and that she was sorry I felt the way I felt. Sorry I felt the way I felt. I folded the letter and put it back in the envelope. I set it on the counter. Biscuit sniffed it once, lost interest, and walked away, which felt like exactly the right response. I didn't write back. Not yet. Maybe not ever. I was still deciding what, if anything, I wanted to say. Whether there was a version of this that ended in some repaired thing, or whether the most honest thing I could give myself was simply permission to stop waiting. What I knew was this. I had turned 29 at a round table by a window with people who loved me without conditions. I had a cat who met me at the door. I had a blue and gold scarf in my closet and a card that said I was worth celebrating. I had an aunt who told me the truth out loud so it could exist in the air. And I had $34,000 a year back in my own account, which I was going to use to go to Lisbon. I hadn't booked the flight yet. I was going to. I'd been looking at October actually, the same honey-colored light, just somewhere else. Somewhere I'd chosen entirely for myself, with no apology attached to it. I opened my laptop that night and pulled up flights. Biscuit climbed into my lap, turned twice, and settled. I started planning a trip for one, and for the first time in a very long time, one felt like exactly enough. I've thought a lot about why it took a birthday to finally make things clear. Not a fight, not a dramatic confrontation, not some moment where everything came to a head in a way I could point to and say, "There, that's where it broke." Just a dinner table with 2 empty chairs and a text that wished me well the way you'd wish a stranger well, politely, from a distance, with nothing behind it. I think the reason birthdays cut differently is that they're one of the few moments in adult life when you're allowed to expect to matter. You don't ask for much, you don't demand anything. You just quietly hope that the people who are supposed to love you will show up. And when they don't, not because of an emergency, not because of anything that couldn't have been a phone call 2 hours earlier, you see something you can't unsee. What I learned isn't something I could have been told. I know that now. My aunt could have sat me down at 23 and said, "You cannot pay your way into being chosen," and I would have nodded and understood it in my head, and then gone home and set up the automatic transfer anyway. Because the truth is, when you grow up feeling like an afterthought, you develop this quiet, persistent belief that you just haven't done enough yet. That love is a ledger. That if you keep adding to your column, eventually the balance will shift. It doesn't work that way. It never worked that way. The people who treat you as optional will continue to treat you as optional regardless of what you give them. Because the way they see you has nothing to do with what you've given. It has to do with who they are. And that is not something you can fix with money or patience or by always showing up early and staying late. The hardest part of what I did, canceling that transfer, not picking up the phone, wasn't the guilt. It was the grief. Because what I was really grieving wasn't the relationship I had. It was the one I'd spent 29 years trying to build with people who were never quite going to meet me there. That grief is real, and it deserves to be felt, not rushed through, not explained away. But here's what I also know. The moment I stopped trying to earn something that was never going to be given, I got something back, not from them, from myself. A kind of clarity that felt almost physical, like my posture changed, like I could breathe lower in my chest. Intelligence, I think, is not just about knowing facts or solving problems. It's about eventually being honest with yourself about what is actually happening, even when the honest version is harder to hold than the story you've been telling. It takes courage to look at a situation clearly without softening it. And it takes character, real character, to respond to that clarity without bitterness. To not blow anything up. To just quietly stop and turn and walk toward your own life. My aunt said something I keep coming back to. She said that generosity isn't infinite, and it was never my job to earn my way into being loved. I wrote that down. Not because I needed to remember the words. I don't think I'll forget them. But because I wanted them to exist somewhere outside of me. Something true, written down, taking up space in the world. I'm going to Lisbon in October. I have a cat who meets me at the door. I have a blue and gold scarf in my closet and a round table by a window where people who love me showed up without being asked. That's not a consolation prize. That's a life. And I'm just starting to understand that it was always enough. I just had to stop looking somewhere else to find it.